Welcome back to a triple FPL upload today with the team selection for Gameweek 14. I've still got the wildcard in my back pocket after using the free hit in the previous game week, and there's such a quick turnaround between deadlines. Don't be caught out by tomorrow's Gameweek 14 deadline. I'll be going live 2 hours before things lock in and answering all your questions, providing team news, injury updates, locking in FPL Challenge and FPL, also top 10 captains, clean sheet odds, you name it. And some of that will be addressed in this video with the top 10 captains towards the very end of this podcast. And for FPL Challenge, I've currently got Raya, Munoz, Mbumo captain, Enzo Fernandez, Salah, and Erling Haaland. We have an unlimited budget, we can pick 6 players, and this week it is called Value Creators. So double points are awarded for midfielders priced at 7 million or under, and that's where Enzo Fernandez comes into play. So maybe I'll tweak things a little bit more to fully take advantage of the challenge this week, because some of them might not even start, like Mohamed Salah, and even Enzo Fernandez isn't guaranteed to get the nod against Leeds away. I think rotation could be a big factor in Gameweek 14 for teams like Arsenal, Chelsea and Crystal Palace. And the same goes for the month of December, where we have such a congested fixture schedule with quick turnarounds between Premier League matches, European competitions and also the Carabao Cup. So it's going to be very important to have squad depth to manage this fixture period very effectively and then go into 2026 with a solid foundation and platform to avoid using the wild card, the second one at least, until later on in the campaign with all the doubles and blanks happening after Gameweek 30. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel and also hit that notification bell so you're always up to date on my content, both FPL and UCL Fantasy. Stay tuned for the Matchday 6 content, the Limitless and Wildcard squads, my team selection, and another deadline stream next week. And of course, Gameweek 15 will also be covered. That's going to take place over the weekend. Check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, for access to my videos, amongst many other perks, my Discord server, the FPL League, FPL Challenge, Spotify, Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky can all be found in the description. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Gameweek 13 is still fresh in our memories. I just activated the free hit, which leaves me with 1 booster left for the first half of the campaign, and the wildcard will be very important. But Emi Martinez did his job with a 7-pointer in that 1-0 victory against Wolves. So that Midlands derby won in favour of Aston Villa once again, and they are 4th in the Premier League table. They're looking very solid at this moment in time, and they're one of the most informed teams across the country. They have some tough games coming up like Brighton and Arsenal, but Emi Martinez did his job. I only wanted him for 1 week and he produced 7 points overall. I also doubled up on Aston Villa defensively with Matty Cash, who got a 6-pointer. He was on course to getting a bonus point, but that changed towards the end of that match. And Dancer was subbed in for Mohamed Salah, who didn't play a single minute in that 2-0 win against West Ham, whilst Tottenham went 2-0 down in 6 minutes against Fulham and ended up losing 2-1 on the day. Now, the other 2 defenders were Nico Riley, who had a promising start with the assist, but Man City conceded twice in the second half and left things late to win 3-2 in the end. And picking Collins over Van den Berg wasn't a massive difference, but Collins secured DEFCON whilst Van den Berg blanked, so it was an extra 2 points being gained. But I think the game-changing decision for me this week was picking Foden over Jeremy Doku, because that was such a massive swing there, with Foden scoring a brace, producing 15 points overall, and just being the standout player on the free hit. But I also made a change in the deadline stream where I had Cody Gakpo and I sold him to go for a front three, and Danny Welbeck was essentially the like-for-like replacement, and I had King on the bench, which you're going to see very soon. So that was quite disappointing. That would have turned this into a spectacular week. Kevin Schade was also a disappointment, especially when compared to his teammate Dango Ouattara, who scored and assisted to produce a double-digit haul, and Morgan Rogers was quite quiet against Wolves, and the same goes for Ollie Watkins, who was a substitute on the day. So with Aston Villa, they were worth covering defensively, but their attackers left a lot to be desired, and that can happen sometimes. They don't really have that standout FPL asset like we saw last season with Morgan Rogers and the year before with Ollie Watkins. As for my front three, Erling Haaland blanked as my captain, and Danny Welbeck was a big disappointment, so selling Gakpo to him was ultimately a mistake. But Igor Thiago scored a brace against Burnley, and he just can't stop scoring, with 11 goals for the season and amazing underlying numbers, particularly for a striker at his price point. Before activating the free hit, I sold Joao Pedro to Igor Thiago, but that transfer didn't carry over, as I've told people multiple times for UCL Fantasy and FPL regarding the Limitless and free hit chips. You can't do that to sort of have a loophole in the game and, you know, have transfers go through free hit and then have those transfers, go through to Game Week 15 and 14, for example. That's not going to be the case here. So that is a shame. Even though Igor Thiago plays Arsenal, he is the most transferred in player for the upcoming deadline, and he offers amazing value for the rest of the season if he continues at this rate. When I look at my bench, though, it was quite underwhelming. You don't really want to have bench points anyway, particularly on the free hit. But Dubravka got 1 point, Salah didn't play whatsoever, Estev got 3, and Josh King got an assist and produced 5 points overall. That's his first goal contribution for the season. But picking Mohamed Salah, selling Gakpo for Danny Welbeck, those were the gripes I had with my free hit, and apart from that, not many regrets, even captaining Erling Haaland, which most people did. His effective ownership was over 200% according to the website livefpl.net. So if everything done and dusted, I got 64 points and got another green arrow to 229,000 in the world. So it could definitely be much worse, and I'm quite happy with the way things have turned out, despite a few swings that went against me. Picking Foden over Doku was kind of what saved this and turned it into a green arrow of around, 22 points safe from the safety score. So it could have been much worse. I'll look at the positives from this week, but when analyzing prices, it's not worth talking about the free hit squad because you now have what you had beforehand, and that's the way the free hit works. You play the chip, you have a team specifically for one game week, and then your team reverts back to how it was before you deployed the chip. So Robert Sanchez cost 4.8 million. Lacroix went up in price overnight to 5.1. Jurrien Timber also cost 6.4, and Virgil van Dijk cost 6 million, and he got a clean sheet, of course, in that 2-0 win against West Ham. Bruno Fernandes was also solid against Crystal Palace. He cost 8.9 million, and Ismaila Sarr is injured, and he might be out until after the African Cup of Nations when it comes to Crystal Palace, so he will miss the next 2 games if the scans confirm the worst, and Oliver Glasner didn't seem too optimistic in his press conference. Antoine Semenyo blanked once again. He cost 7.9 million. Ndiaye 6.6. He has been fairly underwhelming in the last couple of game weeks. Joao Pedro went down to 7.4. Erling Haaland does cost 50 million there or thereabouts, and Nick Voltemada is at 7.4 with a solid 7-pointer against Everton in that 4-1 victory. And on my bench, Dubravka and Reinildo cost 4 million, whilst Dan Burn, who got an assist against Everton, is at 5.1 million, and Reinders, who started against Leeds, he got 3 points and he cost 5.3 million in Fantasy Premier League. Let me discuss some transfer plans in every single position, and that's where the wildcard could come in handy. I'm open to using it in Game Week 14, but this week is quite awkward because both Chelsea and Arsenal could rotate, and it wouldn't surprise me if Robert Sanchez made way for Jorgensen at Ellen Road. But David Raya is the best goalkeeper in this game right now. He is second for points scored amongst goalkeepers. I wouldn't go for Roofs with Sunderland's upcoming games, and you don't want to start a Sunderland goalkeeper or defender week in, week out. Otherwise, you might rely on Dubravka more often than you would like. You've also got Verbruggen and a few other goalkeepers at 4.5 million, but I think it's between Raya and Sanchez for my final option on the wildcard, and Nick Pope is an avoid. Dan Burn to Daniel Munoz is also possible, but I think a Newcastle defender is still worthwhile, and the top 2 options they have are Dan Burn and Chow, who is a massive differential with 0.9% ownership, and he scored a brace against Everton in that comprehensive victory on Saturday. Now, Ismaila Sarr will make way to Brian Mbeumo, but the Cameroonian will obviously make way himself to the African Cup of Nations by the time we get to Game Week 16 or 17, when every FPL manager is allocated 5 free transfers. So I am looking at selling Ismaila Sarr, but this could also be to Enzo Fernandez, Declan Rice, Bruno Guimaraes, and the other midfielders covered in my transfer tips and wildcard videos. That also includes Minter, who is a very good option at 6.2 million, so he's even cheaper than Ismaila Sarr, and he's offering more consistency when it comes to FPL output. And in terms of the highlight forward transfer, Joao Pedro out to Igor Thiago is a great long-term move, but Thiago plays Arsenal this week, and that's where timing is very important. I think ideally I'd buy Igor Thiago in Game Week 15 when Brentford face Tottenham away. Then they've got Leeds and Wolves shortly afterwards, and that's where Igor Thiago could get some massive returns. But he is fixture-proof, and the fact he's on penalties will always help him. So let's actually bring all of this together into this team selection without making any transfers. This is how my team would look like, and there are some holes for Game Week 14. But Robert Sanchez would be in goal against Leeds away, and if he were to miss out, Martin Dubravka facing Crystal Palace would be the replacement. So not great, but also not the worst in the world. As for the back three, Lacroix, Timber and Virgil van Dijk is fairly solid, There is no Daniel Munoz, who is one yellow card away from suspension, but I also think there are a few other defenders I would like to incorporate, like Chow from Newcastle. But then again, I've got Dan Burn in my 15-man squad, and here's Tottenham at home up next. So Newcastle might concede in that game, but I don't think it's a terrible chance of a clean sheet. Lacroix facing Burnley away, but I think Crystal Palace could rotate quite heavily. And the same goes for Arsenal. The likes of Ben White and Lewis Skelly could start over Jurrien Timber and Calafiori, especially in the case of the Italian, who is on 4 yellow cards. If he is booked against Brentford, he will miss the Aston Villa fixture over the weekend, and that'll be very difficult for the Gunners. As for Van Dijk, he's a defensive contribution machine. He didn't secure them against West Ham in that 2-0 win, but he got the clean sheet, and he could get a few more against the likes of Sunderland and Leeds coming up next. So I'm fairly happy with the defensive line if they all start. But then when we go to the midfield, the cracks start to appear. Antoine Semenyo and Ndai are in terrible form when it comes to FPL output, and Ismaila Sarr is potentially injured until January, and his next appearance for Crystal Palace could be in February. So he is a very clear sell in my opinion, especially if he misses the next 2 Premier League matches. But Bruno Fernandes is the one shining light in the midfield. There's no denying that. My other option is Reinders, and with only 2 free transfers, I think I need to make even more modifications to the midfield to really optimize it and have a solid platform for the Christmas period, where squad depth will be very important with the fixture schedule, which is so congested, and some teams like Arsenal, Crystal Palace and Chelsea could inevitably rotate. That won't be the case for Man United with their 1 game a week policy, with no Carabao Cup and no European competitions. But Bruno Fernandes is always fixture proof, and he's also nailed on in that United team. So even if they had multiple games per week, he's always going to start for the Red Devils in the Premier League and get plenty of goals, assists, even DEFCON from time to time, and he's the main penalty taker for the Red Devils. West Ham looks very encouraging next week. And with my forward line, the fixtures are also quite solid. Haaland's up against Fulham away, Joao Pedro facing Leeds, but will he start that game? That's the key question. And Nick Voltemada is up against Tottenham. I think the next 2 home games for Newcastle look very encouraging for Nick Voltemada and co. And Burnley, of course, will be the other game over the weekend. So I'm fairly happy with the forward line, but the main issues lie in the midfield and the lack of squad depth at my disposal. And I would also incorporate Igor Thiago long-term, Jean-Philippe Mateta. I think those 2 would make up the best front 3 alongside Erling Haaland. And when you look at my bench, it's quite disastrous. Martin Dubravka, I mean, look, he's a 4 million goalkeeper. He would be on my wildcard anyway. Dan Burn isn't too shabby, but then you look at Reinders and Reinildo, I see both of them blanking this week, and Reinders might not even start this game with Cherki taking his spot. But Dan Burn versus Chow is very identical. There's not really too much in it, but Chow would be my preference. Joao Pedro up against Jean-Philippe Mateta. I think the Frenchman would be the clear victor, and Igor Thiago is a better option long-term than Voltemada, but for the next 2, I wouldn't mind keeping the German. It's just the midfield that is such a huge issue. Ismaila Sarr would be the priority sell, that goes without saying, and then maybe one of Reinders, Semenyo or Ndai would be the other transfer out without using the wildcard chip. As for the captaincy though, Erling Haaland would probably win yet again, and Bruno Fernandes is the closest to usurp him with the vice-captaincy on the Portuguese maestro. I think that's the way I'd probably go about it. And in my top 10 captaincy list, which you'll see towards the end of this video, Bruno Fernandes ranks very highly. The same goes for Brian Mbeumo, and despite the recent downturn in form for the Cameroonian, I still think he offers more open play threat and goal scoring potential than Bruno Fernandes. As for expected points, which are taken by the website Fantasy Football Hub, Robert Sanchez offers a decent stat of 3.7 and Dubravka is at 3.6. With my defensive line, Lacroix is at 4.6 and Timber offers 5.1, but both of them are at risk of rotation during midweek. Virgil van Dijk is the highest in my defensive line with 5.4, and Bruno Fernandes is second amongst all my 50-man squad with 5.9. Ismaila Sarr is now at 1.2. Semenyo offers 5.6. Ndai is at 4.4. Joao Pedro has the same number, and Erling Haaland is top yet again with 7.7. And Voltemada isn't particularly high, offering 4.9 predicted points, but I still think he's a good option against Tottenham and Burnley at home. On my bench, there is Dan Burn with 3.6, Reinders at 1.7, and finally Reinildo Mandava, who has 2.3 expected points against Liverpool. I will keep him as far away from my starting 11 as possible, despite the fact that Liverpool haven't been great this season. You'd still back them to score some goals against Sunderland at Anfield, and I think the captaincy speaks for itself, but there are definitely some areas where I could improve, and the midfield stands out above the rest. I would highly recommend you use the website fpl.team. There are also other tools where you can visualize future game weeks, compare different chip strategies and transfer plans. So with 2 free transfers, I could sell João Pedro to Igor Thiago, which is a downgrade this week, but long term that would improve my squad and give me even more money in the bank to buy Phil Foden, and that would be my replacement for Ismaila Sarr. I would have nothing left over in the bank. 50.6 expected points, and the rest of the starting 11 would be the same. The captaincy would also be identical. I'd probably still go for Erling Haaland, but Bruno Fernandes is certainly very tempting with this setup. And if I compare that to the wildcard, the expected points here is 54, and Daniel Munoz versus Van Dijk is a debate that I talked about in the wildcard podcast. But Sanchez in goal, Timber, Munoz and O'Reilly in the defensive line, Bruno Guimaraes, Enzo, Minter and Mbeumo looks very solid, and that front three of Haaland, Mateta and Igor Thiago is probably the best on paper for the next month or two, and I was ahead of the curve when it came to recommending these players a few months ago as well. On the bench, Dubravka, Rice, Chow and Van Heck. So you might look at it and think there are some similarities, but the midfield is completely different, and even the forward line has 2 changes in there. Of course, I can get to Igor Thiago myself if I wish, and that allows me to get Phil Foden for 8.1 million. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Would you wildcard in my situation or use 2 free transfers? Even a hit isn't really like something you should be allergic to, and it could help in terms of building a solid platform for the long term. We get 5 free transfers in Gameweek 16, so you can also use up your free transfers and be aggressive with your moves and just look at what's right in front of you. And with the wildcard chip, that's where you want to build a solid long-term platform and avoid using the second wildcard if possible until after Gameweek 30 with all the doubles and blanks that will come from that stage onwards, and that's all covered in my chip strategy guide and how to play FPL video. The last couple of game weeks have shown there's an opportunity to go against Erling Haaland for the captaincy. Daniel Munoz is in 10th place facing Burnley away, but he is 1 yellow card away from suspension, and we could see Crystal Palace heavily rotate during midweek. The same goes for Chelsea, but João Pedro is 9th and he's my favourite Chelsea asset, assuming he does start. Enzo Fernandez wouldn't be too far behind. Nick Voltemada is 8th, facing Tottenham at home. Antoine Semenyo is 7th, but he has been poor for a while now. His last return, essentially, or last huge return, was against Fulham. He got 1 assist against Crystal Palace in a 3-3 draw shortly afterwards, and since then, he has done nothing but blank. He was injured, of course, as well, to be fair, and missed a few games in the process. Alexander Isak is 6th, and he scored his first Premier League goal for Liverpool in that 2-0 victory against West Ham. Salah would have been right up there, but the fact he didn't play whatsoever against West Ham is quite concerning. Phil Foden is 5th, facing Fulham away, and Bruno Fernandes makes the top 4 up against West Ham. Mateta is also in the podium with Mbeumo and Erling Haaland, so I certainly wouldn't mind an Mbeumo or Mateta for the captaincy this week, and even Bruno Fernandes with some decent form overall. Nothing maybe too, outlandish, no massive returns in terms of goal scoring. He is still going to be very consistent when it comes to goal contributions, and he has so many avenues to points, being the main penalty taker for Manchester United. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also hit that notification bell so you're always up to date on my content, both FPL and UCL Fantasy. Stay tuned for next week with the Matchday 6 videos and live streams, the Limitless and Wildcard squads, my team selection, and the deadline stream. And the same goes for Gameweek 15 content after tomorrow's deadline stream on Tuesday. Follow me on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky, Dylan RCM, and check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the Championships, Furlax to my videos, proud to comments, amongst many other perks. My Discord server, the FPL League and Spotify can also be found in the description. I'll see you tomorrow for the next deadline stream. Show support to the channel after this triple upload today, and there'll be much more where that came from for both FPL and UCL Fantasy.